From WNYC, this is NYCNow. I'm Janae Pierre, and I have 2 words for you. Commie Corridor.
It is not a reflection of the Communist Party. This was this kind of cheeky name to talk about where they had this really high concentration of support for Mayor Mamdani and also a large population of Democratic Socialists of America members.
The DSA is gaining political power in New York City. On today's show, we hop along the Commie Corridor to better understand the voters and neighborhoods driving this moment. But before we get into that, here are a few of the news headlines we're keeping eyes on. President Trump is looking into ways to stop New York City's new pied-à-terre tax. If you haven't heard already, the city plans to tax second homes worth more than $5 million and condos worth more than $1 million. Trump says the policy will drive rich people out of the Big Apple. A state judge has already paused the new levy, which was set to take effect next year. New York State officials are suing to shut down Kalshi over claims that the platform is facilitating illegal gambling. And we're not talking chump change here. Attorney General Letitia James is seeking $36 billion in damages from the company. The New York City Council is joining the list of political leaders taking a hard look at the practices of prediction markets as well. The inquiry could lead to new legislation from the city. We'll see what happens. Council Speaker Julie Menin expects a response from Polymarket on its practices within the next 2 weeks. The Bronx is getting its first busway. The half-mile route on Tremont Avenue will ban most cars and give priority to buses, big trucks, and emergency vehicles. City leaders say buses on this clogged route crawl at about 5 miles per hour. But the mayor expects the busway will speed up trips for riders by 6 minutes once it's complete in mid-September. If you want to read more about what's happening in and around New York City, check out our news site, Gothamist. When the results came in on primary night in June, there was one watch party here in the city where every winning candidate at each level of government was backed by the Democratic Socialists of America.
When we introduce our candidates, we use a language of hope. We say the next assembly member, the next state senator, the next congressperson. Tonight, we use a language of fact.
Mayor Mamdani was there, and so was my colleague, WNYC's senior politics reporter, Brigid Bergin. Hey, Brigid.
Hey, Janae.
I just knew that you loved hanging in clubs in Bushwick. I knew it.
I don't know how you could tell. But I will say, on this particular night, the club was packed. It's a place called 99 Scott Studio in Bushwick. It was a former warehouse, but the energy in that room that night, Janae, I mean, it was pulsating. And it was filled with supporters of these DSA candidates who had all won their races.
And welcoming up to the stage, Assemblywoman Diana Moreno.
You talked about the energy, and I mean, you can hear it here.
And the one, the only, Congresswoman Claire Valdez.
These wins are a really big deal. Valdez beat the sitting borough president, and people are still trying to figure out what this actually means, even myself. I mean, the mayor said it's all part of this growing political movement that's bigger than his own election last year. We spoke about that growing political movement last week when we unpacked some changes in how the Democratic Socialists of America describe working class. I was even confused by it. Am I in it or not? We went out and asked New Yorkers, and people couldn't settle on a unified definition. And as the DSA's political power has grown in this city, which you can see by that sweep on primary night, some analysts attribute it to another group, the renter class. I'm definitely in that one. We'll get into what that group is in a moment. But Brigid, you talked to one of those analysts, right?
Yeah, I talked to this guy named Michael Lange. So nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Good.
What a beautiful day.
I know.
And the sky's not orange.
He's been writing about this renter class and where they live, and he's called this area the Commie Corridor.
I published an article that talked about the Commie Corridor as these string of neighborhoods in Western Queens and North Brooklyn that, are kind of the heart of the political left here in New York City.
I asked Michael to help me understand, what was it about this movement and why was it so concentrated in these neighborhoods? So I asked Michael to give me a tour. And so over about 2 days, we started trying to unpack these neighborhoods, and we started right in front of Mayor Mamdani's former apartment.
It's a beautiful building, you know?
Now, this is a rent-stabilized one-bedroom. He started renting there in about 2018. It was $2,300 a month. Since he's moved out, Janae, the rent is now $3,100.
Wow.
That's a 35% increase. But, you know, that is what the NYU Furman Center has found. Rents in Astoria have jumped over the past 20 years. 35% is the average in Astoria. Now, that is higher than the rest of Queens, and it's higher than the rest of the city. But it speaks to this cost of living crisis that became central to Mamdani's campaign. And it's something that Michael Lange says is squeezing people's bottom line and has really given rise to this renter class.
This kind of a renter is now like a political identity of sorts.
So Astoria, like the rest of these neighborhoods in what he has called the Commie Corridor, are filled with renters. Many of them are young professionals, and they're really getting squeezed by this cost of living.
Like everybody else, right?
Absolutely.
So younger folks, they're young and they rent, and they're really feeling the burden of this affordability crisis.
Brigid, I keep hearing you say Commie Corridor, and this struck me in the beginning, so I have to ask it now. Is there any connection to the Communist Party? Because communists, come on now.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, right? Like, that's what President Trump calls them, right?
Right.
In short, no, it is not a reflection of the Communist Party, but this was this kind of cheeky name that Michael Lange came up with to talk about where they had this really high concentration of support for Mayor Mamdani and also a large population of Democratic Socialists of America members, people who are, card-carrying members of this organization that was really instrumental to him getting elected. And, as it turns out, not just him. This is where now a whole other crop of elected officials, as you mentioned, from all levels of government, were successful in their primaries. And, frankly, Socialist Street doesn't really have a ring to it. So, Commie Corridor it was.
You're right. Okay, so we know, Brigid, by the way, that the DSA here in New York has doubled since Zohran Mamdani announced his mayoral campaign. So where'd you go next on this Commie Corridor tour?
So we hit a bunch of different places. Michael really helped curate our tour. And part of what we were doing was trying to unpack what this movement's about through the places and the people we met along the way. They were trendy spots. They were very young. You tended to find that there were people who were pro-Palestinian. That's been a central issue to the DSA. Very kind of accepting of people, regardless of gender, like a lot of queer spaces. And it starts to hint at why this movement is growing, not just in New York City, but we're starting to see in other parts of the country. So the first place after Mamdani's apartment that we went to was a restaurant, just steps down the block from Mamdani's apartment, called King of Falafel. And this place it's more than just the food that draws people.
My name is Freddie. My name is actually Faris Zadia, but everybody's known me Freddie from the early 1980s. I'm the chef and owner of King of Falafel and Shawarma.
When you walk into the restaurant, the owner, Freddie, he's a Palestinian man. The business started actually as a food cart. He also drove a taxi before that. But you know where Freddie stands on the issue of Israel and the issue of Palestine. The restaurant is decorated in colors of the Palestinian flag, red, black, white, and green. Now, he also has a DSA sign in his window. But, Janae, this is great. I asked him, how did he first get involved in politics? And he said when he became a citizen back in the 1980s, his friend convinced him to register as a Republican.
My friend convinced me to register a Republican. I never paid attention. I only used to pay at the major election. I never did primaries or anything.
But, he wasn't that active in politics, certainly not that interested in primaries.
So he just did it.
He did it for a while, and then guess who he met?
But then he came in 24, when Mamdani running for the mayor for the office. Mamdani went on since the early 2020. What he did for the Palestinians and his movement, his ideas.
And Freddie wanted to support that, wanted to support the DSA. And so when Mamdani had his first meeting with people talking about how he was considering a run for mayor, guess who catered it?
Freddie's.
Yes, he did.
Before you left Astoria, Brigid, did you get anything good to eat?
We took some falafel for the ride, of course.
All right, cool. Where'd you go next?
So from there, we went to a place in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. It's called Plus Brooklyn. It's a plus-size vintage and consignment shop.
Nice.
And it was actually suggested by Assemblymember Emily Gallagher, who, has been in office since 2020. She's relatively young. She defeated a guy named Joe Lental, who had been representing the area in the state assembly for almost 5 decades. And then before that, it was his father. And then before that, it was his grandfather. So when Emily won that seat, it was a seismic moment for the politics of Greenpoint.
Definitely. She toppled a family dynasty.
Exactly. And then after she had been elected, and she did not have the support of, some of these more leftist movements when she ran, she then joined DSA and has been part of the socialists in office since she's been in the assembly. And so we went there because she wanted us to meet the shop owner at Plus Brooklyn, a woman named Alexis Craze. And she talked about why she opened the shop 10 years ago, how basically people who are not of average size, in her words, fat people are marginalized. And she was trying to create a space that was welcoming for people of all body shapes, for people of all gender identities. Yeah. And that's what Plus Brooklyn is.
I love that. But, as much as I'm a fashion girly, Brigid, how does that represent the Commie Corridor?
Because she said the ethos that was behind building that shop and creating a safe space is also what led her to support some of these DSA-aligned events.
I wanted to create a community space. And I mean that in the sense that, as somebody as part of a marginalized group, there are very few people who have that lived experience that know what it's like to walk into a store and find nothing that fits you or feel like you're kind of on the periphery or as, frankly, being an outsider. So I thought if we build it, they will come. And that's kind of what happened.
So at the start of the second Trump administration, as those ICE raids started picking up across the country, as we saw American citizens killed by ICE officers, the staff at the store was just feeling really frustrated and really powerless. And so Assemblymember Gallagher suggested, hey, what about if you opened up your shop and did a Know Your Rights training so that people in the community would understand what do we do if we see ICE officers here? And, Assemblymember Gallagher said it's become, one of the safest feeling spaces for a lot of people in that community because they can have that kind of conversation there. And Alexis agreed.
It was kind of organic, and it did feel really empowering and natural too, because that's kind of what we had been doing all along, is creating space for people to meet and congregate.
This is really a characteristic of some of these businesses that we stopped at along this tour of the Commie Corridor. These are not just business owners, but these are people who are reflecting the interests and the organizing of their community.
We're going to take a break here, but when we get back, Brigid and I discuss the G word, gentrification, and concerns about how the DSA might be contributing to it. Stay with us. Welcome back. Before the break, WNYC reporter Brigid Bergin took us to Astoria, Queens, and Greenpoint, Brooklyn, two neighborhoods within the so-called Commie Corridor that has reawakened the spirit of community organizing across the city. But who are the people making up these neighborhoods?
I asked that question repeatedly, and buckle your seatbelt. We went to Bushwick next. So
you love Bushwick. I am seeing this.
And when we were there, I sat down with the co-chairs of the New York City chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America.
My name is Gustavo Gordillo. I'm one of the co-chairs of the New York City Democratic Socialists of America.
And I'm Grace Mauser. I'm the other co-chair of New York City DSA. And yeah, we're right off the Myrtle Avenue stop and kind of a hub of DSA activity in the city.
We met at this place called Boyfriend Co-op.
Yeah.
It's a worker-owned collective cafe bar, and Gustavo described it as a place that was friends of their cause.
They've hosted many of our socials and events and fundraisers here. The first event I came here was for a trans rights campaign fundraiser.
So DSA has hosted watch parties at Boyfriend Co-op in Bushwick. They were actually over capacity in 2025 when they were watching those mayoral primary results.
Oh, yeah, it was popping.
It was. And, they appreciate places who welcome them, early in their rise. But this is a big space by New York standards. It was really packed. It was a real sign that this movement was growing. So I asked them about what I'm hearing from people who say, okay, this movement is growing, but it's multiplying with these gentrifiers, with these transplants, with these people who are coming to New York but don't necessarily have roots in New York and understand the needs of people who've built their families here, who've been here for generations. And, they were willing to push back on that. One of the things that Grace pointed to, how one of their candidates in that primary in Upper Manhattan, Daria-Lisa Avila Chevalier, was able to defeat the incumbent Democratic Congressmember Adriano Espaillat. And, that's a district that you couldn't win without a multiracial coalition. The pushback that you hear from some people in these neighborhoods is these are the newcomers, these are the gentrifiers, these are people who, haven't been in the city that long and they are displacing long-term residents. So talk about that a little bit.
It's both shifting and an unfair criticism. People who are arguing this are defending people who have been in charge while this gentrification was happening, right? You heard this a lot uptown, and people defending Espaillat on those grounds. But Espaillat had been in power for 30 years as his neighbors were being forced out of the neighborhood that he represented. So clearly, whatever he was doing to fight gentrification was not adequate. So I think a lot of people responded to that, and both newcomers and people who have lived there a long time want to stay in their homes, and they have that in common, and we're trying to highlight that.
Grace talked about how the membership has become more diverse racially and age-wise. She said they have members now who are from 16 years old to 80 years old. And Gustavo really underscored the point that Avila Chevalier couldn't have won with support only from white voters.
That is white residents in that district are a minority. There is no way to win an election there without a multiracial coalition. And the political establishment can choose to obfuscate and ignore those lessons. But if they want to fight back effectively, they would do well to actually look at the data.
That's really interesting. So what I'm hearing, Brigid, is maybe the membership is reflecting, who's actually up against that affordability crisis. Renters, young people with some increasing diversity.
Yeah, and this came up later in the tour as well when I met with State Senator Jabari Brisport. And, we went to a location where he had picked out a place called Sistas Place, which has some deep roots in the community. I will say we weren't there very long because there was a stop work order in place. So we started there and then we moved to another location. But that site has some historic roots in the neighborhood. It was the home of the December 12th movement, which is a Black radical organization. They've been doing a lot of work in the community for about 4 decades now, work, calling for reparations, Black liberation, fighting against police brutality. And so I wanted to make sure that I asked him this similar question, how he as a Black elected official thinks about the growth of DSA membership And does this movement address the issues of his constituents, of Black and brown New Yorkers in his district?
Yeah, I would say the complaints are coming almost entirely from people in tight political circles who are upset that their friends have lost elections. When you talk to everyday people, especially everyday Black people on the street, number one thing they talk about is the cost of living, the desire to stay in Bed-Stuy there where they can afford it. And aside from housing, which is the number one thing, it becomes schools. It becomes, we need opportunities for our youth. No one on the streets, like everyday regular people, are saying, oh no, DSA is scary. That is something coming completely out of a Black establishment political class.
What about the concerns, though, related to displacement? Like talking about, this is a neighborhood that has lost thousands of Black residents and has been replaced in large part by white residents, maybe people who are more inclined to be DSA supporting. How do you make sense of that argument?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty clear what happened. Black people in Bed-Stuy and central Brooklyn were displaced by greedy developers and landlords who either raised the rents on them that they couldn't afford in existing buildings or built new homes that they could not afford. And to push back against that, what we have at pushing for in DSA that is very popular is increased tenant protections. At the city level, freezing the rent for rent-stabilized units. At the state level, passing greater tenant protections like good cause evictions. This push to build a social housing development authority where the government gets back in the business of building housing so that you're not beholden to a corporate developer that wants to get double-digit margins on their home, allows us to build housing that people can actually afford to live in.
Brigid, I want to go back to something that Senator Brisport said. He described the criticism as coming entirely from the Black political establishment. Did you hear directly from anyone who could explain what those concerns are actually about?
Yeah, Janae, I spoke to political strategist Lupe Todd Medina about Brisport's comments. She has been living in Bed-Stuy for 20 years at this point, has worked for several different candidates, more moderate Democrats, including House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries. And she says this debate is not that simple, that the concerns are broader than just a fight over elections.
There seems to be a sense within the DSA moving into Bedford-Stuyvesant, and then they want to change Bedford-Stuyvesant to their liking instead of appreciating what is already existing. And so when people are talking about, they say that DSA is going to dilute the power, I don't think it necessarily is they're just talking about diluting the political power. It's also the power of the community.
So that tension over who gets to shape the neighborhood, that's still very much alive.
Yeah, so much of my conversation with her was about the history of the neighborhood, the idea that people moving in don't know the small business owners who may live in the same building where they operate, or that people are opening new places that don't make her feel welcome.
Where did the tour end?
So our final stop on the tour was a bar in Ridgewood, Queens called Peg's Cavalier, where we met Claire Valdez, the Democratic nominee for New York's 7th Congressional District.
Yeah, she defeated the sitting borough president at the time, Antonio Reynoso.
Yeah, who had, Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez's very strong endorsement. Mm-hmm. Lange told me that of all the neighborhoods in the Commie Corridor, this neighborhood, Ridgewood, is the one with the most left-leaning voters. It's where Valdez won by 20 points and where Mamdani did the best when he was running for mayor as well. So when I asked Valdez this similar question about the changes in the neighborhood, she said it's one that's been defined by cycles of displacement, which can apply to all the neighborhoods in the Commie Corridor. But she also says she doesn't think the growth in working class politics or, DSA membership is something that will stay confined to just a few neighborhoods in Brooklyn and Queens, because the issues that these voters are facing are issues that people are facing across the city and frankly across the country.
It's a very young neighborhood. It's very progressive. Historically, it's changed a lot in recent years. There's been a lot of, gentrification. It was one of the neighborhoods that saw the greatest number of rent-stabilized units just disappear from the market over the last few years. I think it's given rise to a lot of, obviously, displacement and precarity, but it's still a neighborhood that has, many families who have been here for generations and generations.
Yeah. When Zohran Mamdani announced that he'd be running for mayor, I wondered to myself, when it came to the DSA, is this a moment or is this a movement? And I certainly have the answer to that.
Yeah.
Where do you see this movement going next?
Well, if you talk to the co-chair of the New York City chapter of DSA, Grace Mauser, she has a very explicit answer for you. I asked her that question at Boyfriend Co-op. Here's what she said.
Just to be clear, we think AOC should run for president, but the choice is hers, of course.
And Janae, to bring it back to Mamdani, 5 days before the primary, when there was this slate of Democratic Socialist candidates who were on the ballot, people were looking at the primary and saying, wow, Mamdani's put a lot on the line here. He has really staked his electoral influence on the outcome of these primaries. Can he motivate people to show up at the polls in the same way for other candidates as they showed up for him?
Yeah.
And there were questions, could he do it? And the answer was he did.
Yeah.
And the issue is he's saying, this is not about me. This is about a movement. And oh, by the way, 2028, it starts now.
That's WNYC's Brigid Bergin. Thanks a lot, Brigid.
Thanks, Janae.
And thank you for listening to NYC Now. I'm Janae Pierre. See you next time.